Hello again, everyone. My name is Louis Ruggiero. Welcome to the King Messiah Project. This is lesson 3 of our 12-part Refuting Calvinism series. The subject of this lesson is original sin, man's depravity, and God's prevenient grace. Let me begin by saying that the concept of original sin has been taught in every church within fundamental Christianity for almost 2,000 years. It's a fundamental precept. However, not every denomination agrees about how original sin has affected mankind's nature. That's why when non-Calvinists discuss this topic with Calvinists, they need to understand why there's a difference in understanding as far as the total depravity issue. How do we find out how mankind has been affected as a result of the fall in the garden? The answer is clear. We go to the scriptures. And let's begin by putting Genesis 2:16 and Genesis 3:23 on the board. This is what it says. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Now we all know what happened next. God permitted the serpent to creep into the garden and deceive and tempt Eve to eat the fruit of the tree. And Adam also ate. On that day, Genesis 3:23 tells us, Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. Now we need to remember that God told Adam that on the day he ate the fruit of the tree, he would surely die. But Adam didn't die physically on that day. So what happened? We'll get to that in a moment. Now, the entire belief about original sin goes something like this. The entire human race was in Adam's loins when he sinned. As a result, God has accredited, charged, or imputed the entire human race with Adam's sin. This is called original sin. Romans chapter 5, verse 12 and 14 bears that out. Let's read it together. This is what it says. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who was the figure of him that was to come. Brothers and sisters, death is separation from God. When Adam and Eve sinned, they were separated from God when they were taken out of the Garden of Eden and out of God's presence. When we are born into this world, we are not born physically dead, but we are born spiritually separated from God. Paul teaches that in Romans chapter 7, verses 9 and 11, when he says the following. Let's put it on the board. Let's read it together. This is what it says. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived, and I died. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it slew me. Now quite clearly, Paul wasn't talking about a physical death here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to write this verse. He would have been physically dead already. He was speaking about a spiritual death, a spiritual separation from God. Adam and Eve were spiritually separated from God when on the day that they were taken out of the Garden of Eden and out of his presence. When we are born into this world, we are spiritually separated from God. That's why Jesus spoke about the necessity of being born again. Now, thanks to Adam and Eve's sin in the garden, we have all inherited Adam's sin nature. Every part of our being has been corrupted, affected, or infected as a result of Adam's sin at the garden. Our heart, our mind, our spirit, our soul, and certainly our flesh have been affected as a result of original sin. We all sin. We just can't help it. It is part of our sin nature. It's called the Adamic nature. And as we know, a most holy God and sinful man cannot coexist. Let's go to 3 verses in the Bible and prove that this is true. The first one, in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 3, Paul calls us by nature the children of wrath. In Psalm chapter 51 verse 5, David said, "Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me." In Psalm chapter 58 verse 3, this is what it says, "The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies." Now, reformers believe that as a result of original sin, mankind is so corrupt, completely corrupt, that he is unable to understand the gospel message. They deny what we call prevenient grace. The Bible clearly teaches God's prevenient grace. The definition of prevenient grace, we'll put it on the board. This is what it says. Prevenient grace is the grace operating on the human will prior to its turning to God. Now, the first biblical evidence of prevenient grace that I would like to share with you is found in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 20. It's the natural revelation that God has instilled in mankind that he, in fact, exists, based on creation itself. Let's put it on the board. Let's read it together. This is what it says. "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even in his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." But there's more. God has instilled in every single one of us something called a conscience, the ability to understand the difference between right and wrong. Adam and Eve had a conscience. They knew they did something wrong when they ate the fruit of the tree. That's why they hid from God's presence after their disobedience took place. And since Adam and Eve have a conscience, we all have a conscience. And that's proven when we read Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Let's put it on the board. Let's read it together. This is what it says. "For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the mean, while accusing or else excusing one another." But finally, and most importantly, God the Father gives every single one of us the ability to understand the gospel message. John chapter 1 verse 9 says, regarding his Son, "That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world." John chapter 8 verse 12, Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." And in John chapter 15 verse 5, Jesus said, "For without me you can do nothing." Jesus Christ lighteth every man that cometh into the world. The Greek word translated lighteth is photizo. Let's take a look at it and take a look at the definition of this word photizo. Photizo is a verb. It is defined as follows: to give light, to shine, to enlighten, light up, illume, to bring to light, render evident, to cause something to exist and thus come to light and become clear to all. That's what Jesus does. To enlighten spiritually, imbue with saving knowledge. That's what Jesus Christ does. He gives us all the ability to understand the gospel message, to instruct, to inform, teach, and to give understanding to. That's the definition of this Greek word photizo. So, is mankind totally enabled, as reformers would have you believe? The answer is no, for three reasons. Number one, God has instilled in every single one of us the universal revelation that he in fact exists, according to Romans 1. Romans 2, 14 and 15 teaches that God has also instilled in every single one of us a conscience, the ability to understand the difference between right and wrong. And finally, God sent his Son into the world to be the light of the world, that all men through him might believe. John chapter 1 verse 9, Christ gives us all the ability to understand the gospel message. Part 2 coming up.